They're calling it mercy, but it's starting to feel more like arrogance, the young Keller student muttered, his reptilian eyes wide as he reviewed the human report on his holo tablet. The class had been abuzz ever since the humans delivered their ultimatum to the Galactic Coalition. The killer professor, a seasoned veteran of numerous interspecies conflicts, flicked his tail in irritation. Arrogance? No, it's more like overconfidence, the professor growled, pacing at the front of the room. Humans are peculiar. They've fought countless wars on their own planet, conflicts so devastating that even the bloodiest wars in this galaxy pale in comparison, and now they refuse to engage, claiming pity as their reason. Ha! They underestimate us. The student, who had enrolled in the intergalactic diplomacy course expecting something less intense, swallowed hard. But Professor, they've assembled a fleet. It's heading straight for Vildar Prime. If they're so confident, why such a massive force? The professor halted his pacing and regarded the student with a weary expression. That's precisely what I'm trying to understand. They claim they don't want war, yet send warships anyway. It's as though they're saying we could annihilate you, but we won't. Out of respect, it's insulting and terrifying. A burly student from the Zorth system raised a clawed hand. Professor, could this be a strategy? Perhaps they aim to intimidate us into surrender without firing a single shot. The professor nodded thoughtfully. That's possible. Humans are masters of psychological warfare. They know fear can be more effective than weapons. But we must not let them see our fear. We must be ready to fight. The young Keller, still focused on the report, shook his head. But what if they're serious? What if they really do see war with us as beneath them? A low murmur swept through the room as the professor's face hardened. Then we'll show them we're not beneath anyone. If they don't want war, we'll give them the one they claim to disdain. As the class ended, the Keller student couldn't shake the growing unease in his chest. He had studied human history and tactics, but now, faced with their fleet, a chilling realization struck him. The humans weren't avoiding war out of pity. They had already calculated the outcome. To them, this conflict wasn't a challenge, it was a chore. Days later, Coalition forces stood ready on Vildar Prime, a planet renowned for its defenses. Armadas from every allied species orbited the planet, bristling with weapons, commanded by seasoned leaders. Yet when the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, it wasn't what they had expected. From the planet's surface, the Keller student watched the human ships appear sleek, dark and silent, like predators slipping into their hunting grounds. The alien forces readied their weapons, but the humans made no move to engage. "Are they mocking us?" the student whispered, observing the eerie calm of the human fleet. Coalition commanders were perplexed. Despite their overwhelming firepower, the humans maintained their distance, as if waiting for something. Finally, a transmission from the human fleet played across all screens. "This is Admiral Kane of the United Earth Fleet. We repeat, we do not wish for war. We respect your right to defend yourselves, but know this: continuing on this path will lead to total annihilation. This is your final chance to stand down. We do this not out of fear, but to spare your people the horrors we are capable of unleashing. Choose wisely." The message ended, and the human fleet remained still, engines humming faintly. The Keller student felt a strange mix of emotions. There were no threats, no bravado, just a cold, matter-of-fact statement. He turned to his professor, who stood nearby, his usual stern demeanor softened by uncertainty. "Professor, what do we do?" The professor's gaze remained fixed on the human fleet. "We cannot show weakness," he finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We must stand our ground. Surrender would mean living under the shadow of human mercy." As orders to prepare for battle spread, the student glanced at the human ships again, an uneasy feeling gnawing at him. Deep down, he knew this wouldn't end well for them, but what choice did they have? The coalition forces launched their first-wave missiles and energy beams streaking through the void. The humans didn't immediately retaliate. Their ships absorbed the initial onslaught, shields flaring briefly before stabilizing. Then, with cold precision, the human fleet began its counteroffensive. The humans moved with terrifying grace, their ships in perfect sync, advancing slowly, almost leisurely, as though daring the coalition to attack again. Watching from the command center, the Keller student couldn't shake the growing dread in his gut. His heart thundered in his chest. He had never witnessed anything like this. The coalition forces, a union of dozens of species, each bringing unique tactics and strategies, were falling into chaos. Commanders frantically barked orders over the comms, desperate to regroup and mount a coordinated defense. But the human ships were already weaving through their formations. Their opening salvo wasn't an overwhelming barrage, but a series of precise strikes. They surgically targeted the coalition's communication systems, weapon controls, and critical infrastructure. In mere moments, entire ships were rendered inoperative, engines disabled, systems fried. The human fleet moved with chilling efficiency, like predators systematically dismantling their prey. "Professor, they're not destroying our ships, they're disabling them," the student exclaimed, eyes glued to the tactical display. "It's as if they don't even see us as a threat." The professor's face was a mask of grim determination as he stared at the unfolding battle. "They're sending a message one louder than any explosion. They're saying we could destroy you, but we choose not to. Every move they make proves their point." As the coalition forces struggled to mount any kind of counterattack, the humans advanced relentlessly. Their ships sliced through the defenses with impeccable timing, dismantling the once mighty fleet piece by piece. On Vildar Prime's surface, panic erupted as soldiers and civilians alike stared skyward, horrified by the flashes of battle above. The planet's ground defenses roared to life, firing volleys of plasma and rockets, but the human ships were too agile, too precise. Automated targeting systems failed to keep up with their movements. In the command center, the Keller student's hands shook as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "Why aren't they finishing us off?" he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "They could end this now, but they're holding back. They want us to understand how hopelessly outmatched we are," the professor said, his voice low and resigned. "This isn't just about winning, they're making sure we know resistance is futile." As if to underscore the point, the human fleet unleashed another wave of attacks. This time they focused on the coalition's most formidable ships, the colossal dreadnoughts and battlecruisers that symbolized their strength. In seconds, these massive vessels were reduced to defenseless hulks, not destroyed but crippled and left adrift. The student's comms unit crackled with frantic voices from the coalition fleet, pleas for reinforcements, desperate calls for retreat, and cries of despair. Fear rippled through the coalition forces like wildfire. Then, cutting through the chaos, a calm, steady voice sent chills down the student's spine. "This is Admiral Kane of the United Earth Fleet. You are defeated. Further resistance is meaningless. We offer you one final chance to surrender. You will not receive another." The message was brief, delivered without emotion, and left no room for misinterpretation. The humans had the coalition in a stranglehold, and everyone knew it. The professor's fists clenched, his tail flicking anxiously. "They're giving us a choice: surrender or be annihilated. But can we really surrender? What happens if we do?" The student tore his gaze from the console, his mind racing. Maybe they'll show us mercy. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. Perhaps they really want to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. "Mercy," the professor scoffed. "From a species systematically dismantling our fleet? No, this isn't mercy, it's control. They want us to submit, to bow and acknowledge their superiority." The student bit his lip, doubt creeping in. "But if we don't surrender, we'll be destroyed. We can't win this." The professor's gaze hardened. Then we fight to the last. If they want victory, they'll have to earn it. We won't go down without a fight." Before the student could reply, a deafening explosion shook the command center. Alarms blared, the lights flickered, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The human fleet had begun targeting the planet's surface, and Vildar Prime's last line of defense was crumbling. The killer student clung to his console, his heart racing. The end felt inevitable, yet it wasn't here, not quite. There was still a sliver of time, a faint chance to turn the tide. But as he looked at the tactical display, the overwhelming power of the human fleet bearing down on them, he couldn't help but wonder if that chance had already slipped away. The ground shook again as another explosion rocked the command center, throwing the student off balance. He caught himself against the console, his breath ragged. The air was heavy with dread, and every soldier and officer in the room felt the weight of the inevitable closing in. "Professor," the student called out, his voice trembling, "what do we do now?" The professor turned to his pupil, steady despite the chaos surrounding them. His eyes were hard, his voice firm. "We do what we must. If this is the end, we make sure it's a story worth remembering. We'll give the humans a fight they'll never forget," the professor declared, but deep down he knew the truth. The coalition was outmatched, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. The human fleet, with its unmatched precision and power, had already won. Now, the only question was whether the humans would accept surrender or erase them from existence. "Prepare all remaining forces for a final strike," the professor ordered, his voice resolute. "If we're going to fall, we'll take as many of them with us as possible." The Keller student nodded, his hands flying over the controls as he relayed the command across the planet. Coalition forces steeled themselves for what was sure to be their final stand. The few functional ships prepared for launch, ground defenses activated, and soldiers braced for the coming onslaught. As the coalition rallied for one last battle, the human fleet made its decisive move. Without warning, the sky above Vildar Prime darkened as the humans deployed a massive orbital weapon. It was a sight unlike anything the coalition had ever seen, an enormous structure emerging from the human flagship, its size dwarfing anything in the coalition's arsenal. The weapon charged with a deep hum, energy crackling ominously around it. The Keller student stared at the screen, his blood running cold. "What is that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The professor's expression was grim. "The end." The human fleet broadcast one final message, Admiral Kane's voice slicing through the tension with chilling clarity. "This is your last chance. Surrender now and your lives will be spared. Resist and you will face the full power of the United Earth Fleet." The coalition forces hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on every commander and soldier. Surrender meant admitting defeat, accepting human dominance, and living under their control. Resistance, on the other hand, guaranteed certain annihilation. The professor turned to the student, his gaze searching. "This is it. The choice is ours. What do you think, young one? Do we fight, or do we live to see another day?" The student looked from the professor to the tactical display, where the human fleet loomed in quiet dominance. His mind raced, weighing the impossible options. Deep down, he knew the answer. The coalition had given everything they had. They had fought valiantly, but the humans were far beyond anything they could overcome. We surrender," the student said, his voice heavy with resignation. "There's no point in dying for nothing." The professor's expression softened. He placed a hand on the student's shoulder. "You've made the right choice. There's no shame in knowing when a battle is lost." With visible reluctance, the professor activated the comms and sent the surrender signal across the planet. Weapons powered down, and the coalition ships ceased fire. The forces stood down, accepting their fate. The human fleet remained still for a long, tense moment. Then, the massive weapon hovering above Vildar Prime powered down, its glow fading as it retracted back into the flagship. Admiral Kane's voice returned, but this time it carried an unexpected tone, one of respect. "Your surrender is accepted. Stand down and prepare for our landing parties. We will occupy your world peacefully. You have made the right choice." Relief swept through the command center, though it was tempered by the heavy weight of defeat. The Keller student slumped in his chair, exhausted by the tension and the realization that their world now belonged to the humans. True to their word, the humans landed without further bloodshed. Their soldiers, clad in advanced armor and wielding weapons that could devastate entire squads in moments, moved with flawless precision and discipline. The coalition soldiers, now prisoners of war, could do nothing but watch in silence as the humans swiftly established control over Vildar Prime. As the occupation began, the Keller student stood beside the professor, staring out at the human ships that now dominated the skies. "Do you think they'll treat us fairly?" the student asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The professor sighed, his gaze distant. "I don't know. Humans are a strange species capable of immense kindness and immense cruelty. But one thing is clear, they are the masters of this galaxy now. We'll have to find a way to live in the world they've created." The student nodded slowly, the gravity of their new reality sinking in. The war was over, and they had lost. But perhaps in time they could learn to coexist with the humans and rebuild their lives under this new, undeniable power. As the sun set over Vildar Prime, the student was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions: fear, relief, and a grudging respect for the humans who had spared them from total destruction. The humans had refused war out of pity, but when forced, they had shown just how devastating they could be. The galaxy would never be the same.